Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. She pushed me away from her and sat on the edge of the bed. Dima, go fill my bath. I need to get ready to leave. Kirill Alexeyevich will be here at 2000 hours. He's taking me to a dinner party with his business partners tonight. I jumped out of our bed, ran to the bathroom, and started filling the tub with water. Kirill Alexeyevich was the financial director of the LSR construction company. Also an extremely handsome man, deep into his 50s, he was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in the company. Whenever I saw him, I was struck by his handsome appearance. He was tall, maybe 2 meters tall, with a toned athletic build, which was rare for a 53-year-old businessman. He had long black hair that he wore combed back, and his piercing blue eyes seemed to be constantly peering at everything around him. Always expensively dressed, he preferred handmade suits and expensive Italian loafers. All these factors combined to make him an attractive and impressive figure in the company. Kirill Alexeyevich was my wife's boss. My wife Vika and I met when we were both in our second year at the Construction Institute. We immediately liked each other and became close friends. Gradually, this friendship turned into a romance, and by the time we got older, we were engaged. When we first met, Vika was a shy, introverted, almost unnoticeable little girl. In high school, she was considered intellectual. Her self-esteem has suffered. The institute did her good. It was an environment in which intelligence and creative thought were valued. Her self-esteem was growing, and at the same time her body was filling up. By the time she became a senior, Vika had turned into a beautiful young woman. My name is Dmitry Ivanov. Everyone calls me Dimka. I am a thin man, slightly over 1 meter 76 centimeters tall. I have slightly feminine features, and the two aunts who raised me often said that I would be a very sweet girl. I'm sure you can imagine that high school was also a difficult experience for me. Skinny little boys don't date cheerleaders. In fact, they don't date anyone at all. My situation was staggering. The institute was also good for me. My self-esteem was growing as fast as Vicky's. In my case, however, it was all that grew. By the time I was in my final year of college, I was still a skinny little young man. Fortunately, Vika has already fallen in love with me. 2 weeks after graduation, he married his now adorable Vika. I was a good student in college, but Vika was also a good student. In the spring of our last year at the institute, a number of prestigious construction companies actively fought for Vika. One of them was LSR. Kirill Alexeyevich was a shareholder and a top manager of this company. He offered Vika a tempting job after graduation, which included a large salary and solid opportunities for rapid promotion. The location of the head office in St. Petersburg made the offer even more attractive. It was not far from both of our hometowns. A week before our wedding, Vika got a job as an analyst at LSR. That summer, we moved to St. Petersburg and bought a small studio apartment in Devyat-Kino. Unfortunately, I quickly discovered that my job prospects are much more limited. After a month of searching, I was finally offered a job as a design engineer at a small construction company bookstore on Michigan Avenue. I jumped at it. They didn't pay much for this job, but Vika earned more than enough money to support both of us. The opening hours were also not very good. I often had to work in the evenings and on weekends. This actually turned out to be an unexpected advantage. This allowed Vika to immerse herself in her work. By early September, she was regularly working 12 to 14 hours a day. Despite the fact that my working day was irregular, I usually worked only about 30 hours a week, so the responsibility for maintaining our small apartment quickly fell on me. We never discussed it, but by the end of September, all household chores informally became my responsibilities. This meant that I did all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. Since Vika worked for a large construction company and earned 85% of our income, she took over the financial management of our house. By the end of the year, none of us had any doubts that Vika had become the dominant partner in our marriage. Over time, we both gradually realized that Vika liked to play a dominant role in our relationship, and I liked to be submissive to her. Vika began to study internet sites where topics such as wife-initiated marriages and female authority were discussed. Soon she started reading books on the subject and emailing me links to websites. We had a few casual discussions on this topic, but we were never able to come to a decision. Everything was informal. It just happened. By our first wedding anniversary, I was not only Vicky's husband, but also her servant. Vika climbed into the tub. She sighed, lying on her back in the hot, soothing water. I took a washcloth and started washing it. I'm not quite sure when bathing my wife became one of my regular duties. Like everything else, it just happened. Vika quickly realized that this was a luxury she enjoyed. This is just one of the many ways I have to pamper her when she's at home. I admit, I like it as much as she does. Vika has a gorgeous body, and washing her is a matter of love. When I was bathing my wife, I casually asked, "Where's the dinner party tonight?" "Somewhere out of town in an expensive restaurant. I forgot the name." I raised my eyebrows. "You're having a tasteful dinner tonight." Vika nodded. Kirill Alexeyevich entertains several important clients from Moscow. You know how he is. In this situation, he wants only the best. My wife's abilities and dedication to hard work were quickly recognized by the firm. 18 months after she started working at LSR, she was promoted to the prestigious position of senior analyst. 6 months later, she became Kirill Alexeyevich's personal assistant. Working as Kirill Alexeyevich's personal assistant was an incredible success. Now Vika received a good salary of almost 900,000 rubles a year with the opportunity to earn additional bonuses. Her additional benefits included an expense account that allowed her to shop at St. Petersburg's most exclusive women's clothing stores. And of course, there was a company car in personal use. Naturally, these rewards had their price. Kirill Alexeyevich was a workaholic. He regularly worked 16 hours a day, and as his assistant, Vika had to be by his side most of that time. As I mentioned earlier, Kirill Alexeyevich was a bachelor. He has never been married. He had no interest in having a wife. Business was his passion. It consumed his life. Because of this, one of Vicky's job responsibilities was to be ready to be his escort in social situations. It wasn't just a matter of convenience. This was done by design. Since most of the social situations in which Kirill Alexeyevich participated were related to business, it was extremely beneficial to have a date who was also his personal assistant and an experienced and knowledgeable financial analyst. As soon as I finished bathing Vika, she got up. When she came out of the tub, I wrapped her in a large towel and wiped her dry. As soon as she was dry, I threw a terry cloth robe over her shoulders and escorted her back to the room. Vika sat down at her makeup table and began brushing her long brown hair. While she was working, she said, "Dima, get out the new black evening dress that I bought at Gostiny Dvor last week and choose underwear for me. Since my dress will be black, my underwear should be black too." She thought for a moment. "The dress has a very low neckline, so I'll need a strapless bra." I took out the dress and put it on the bed. While I was looking for a suitable bra, my wife Vika said, "I want to wear stockings tonight, so I'm going to need a garter belt." I looked at my wife with a puzzled expression on my face. "Why aren't you going to wear tights, love?" Vika turned around. She looked at me for a moment. There was a hint of irritation in his eyes. I started to get nervous. Quickly retreating, I said, "It's all right. I mean, what you chose is your own business." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." Vika smiled at me. "It's all right, Damachka. You're my husband. You have the right to ask me what I choose to wear." The truth is that Kirill Alexeyevich likes it when I sometimes show my panties while sitting at my desk or riding in his limo, and he really likes it when my dress shows a little cleavage. Honey, he's my boss. He pays me very well. I think making him happy is extremely important for both you and me. I nodded. "Yes, Victoria Alexandrovna, I understand." She seemed to like it when I used her first and middle name, and she often said encouraging things to me after I did it. Vika smiled at me. "You're my good boy. Now go find the rest of my outfit while I put on my makeup." She looked at the clock on the dressing table. "Kirill Alexeyevich will be here in 15 minutes. I laid out the rest of my wife's outfit. After she finished applying her makeup, she quickly got dressed. It was obvious that she didn't want to keep her boss waiting. While she was getting dressed, I noticed that she had put on her panties after putting on a garter belt and nylon stockings. I knew there could only be one reason for this, but I was afraid to challenge it. I already risked Vicky's wrath one evening. I didn't dare to do it again. As soon as Vika got dressed, she looked at herself in the full-length mirror. Then she turned around and asked me, "How do I look?" Smiling, I said, "You look absolutely gorgeous, Vika. Kirill Alexeyevich will be charmed by your beauty." I immediately regretted the comment. Maybe it was true, but it still didn't fit the situation. Vika stared at me. After a moment, she smiled. "Dima, I'm glad you feel that way. It shows me that you keep a non-biased attitude towards the demands of my job." She came over, hugged me, and kissed me passionately on the lips. After a moment, she whispered in my ear, "Demachka, you know that I will always love you, don't you?" I replied quietly, "Yes, my love, I know." Vika glanced at the clock on the makeup table. I followed her. It was 2 minutes to 8. "Demachka, we'd better move to the window so that we can watch Kirill Alexeyevich's limousine. I don't want to keep him waiting." I nodded in agreement. Vika grabbed a small black satin purse and hurried to the window. I took a light sweater from the closet and followed her. It was June, but the night breeze from the Gulf of Finland could be cool. I didn't want my wife to freeze. When I approached her, Vika said, "Here he is, I need to run." I rushed to my wife and handed her a sweater. "It's just to keep you warm on the way home." Vika smiled at me. "Thank you, Demachka. You are a wonderful husband." She gave me a quick peck on the cheek. "Don't wait for me. You know how these business dinners go. I'll probably be very late." I watched it through the window. Kirill Alexeyevich was waiting on the sidewalk next to his Rolls-Royce. As soon as my wife came up to him, he kissed her on the cheek and then opened the door for her. Vika got into the limo, and Kirill Alexeyevich sat down next to her. Kirill Alexeyevich's driver closed the door behind him, walked around the car, and got into the driver's seat. The rear windows of the limo were slightly tinted, so it was hard to be sure, but as they drove away, I think I saw Kirill Alexeyevich hug my wife and kiss her passionately on the lips. I sat down on the sofa in the room and took a deep breath. I was quite sure that my wife was having an affair with her boss. The circumstantial evidence was incontrovertible. I know I should have been angry, but I didn't. I was worried, a little jealous and afraid. Oddly enough, I wasn't thrilled with the idea either. Over the past year, I have begun to feel more and more comfortable in the subordinate role that I assumed in my relationship with my wife. The idea of Vicky having an affair with another man didn't make me angry, because now I saw it as one of her rights as the dominant partner in our marriage. Besides, I loved my wife. I didn't want to deny her that pleasure. I was afraid that Vika might leave me for Kirill Alexeyevich right now. He was a handsome, interesting, and rich man. I was worried that although Vika could still take care of me, the opportunity to become Kirill Alexeyevich's wife should be attractive to her. I hoped that Vicky's statement that Kirill Alexeyevich never wanted to get married was accurate. If that were the case, I would be happy to be my wife's submissive, cuckold husband while she was having a whirlwind affair with her boss. I turned on my computer and started browsing the cuckold websites. They have become my favorites over the past few months. I spent several hours reading the stories. That was all I needed to get over the edge. I looked at my watch. It was just after 2200 hours. I didn't feel like sleeping, so I turned on the TV. I sat down and watched a football match. By the time the game finally ended, it was almost midnight. I turned off the TV. Sitting alone in the dark, I started thinking about Vika and Kirill Alexeyevich again. The thought that Kirill Alexeyevich could make love to my wife at that very moment put me in a wild mood. Somehow I had to make it clear to Vika that I didn't care if she was having an affair with her boss. Then I thought that Vika might be planning to leave me for him. It was late. I'm tired. The thought terrified me. I convinced myself that this should be the most likely outcome in this situation. How else could it be? Vika was young and beautiful. Kirill Alexeyevich was rich and handsome. He was supposed to be attracted to my wife, and I couldn't imagine how I could compete with him. I struggled with my despair, clinging to the faint hope that Kirill Alexeyevich really had no desire to get married. It is possible that his only interest was a casual relationship with Vika. That would be fine with me. I smiled to myself. No, it wouldn't be good. It would be wonderful. I closed my eyes. I needed to get some rest. I fell asleep. I was suddenly awakened by the sound of a car engine. I realized that a car had stopped in front of our house. I tried to shake the dream out of my head, but it was difficult. I was fast asleep. I looked at my watch. It was 1:30. I heard the clatter of Vicky's high heels on the sidewalk. I also heard someone else walking with her. I recognized the sound of Vicky inserting the key into the lock, and then the lock clicked. The door opened. I heard my wife say, "Good night, Kirill Alexeyevich. I had a wonderful evening." There was silence. I realized that Kirill Alexeyevich had escorted my wife to the front door of the apartment and was now kissing her goodbye. A few seconds passed. It was a long kiss. Finally, I heard his voice. "I wish I could come inside to you, Vika. I wish I could, but we both know you can't." If Dima, my husband, had woken up and found us together, he would have been angry at what he saw. You know Kirill Alexeyevich, how much I love him. I will never do anything that could jeopardize our marriage. Kirill Alexeyevich sighed. I find it ironic that, being rich, I will always play second fiddle to the engineer of a small construction company. Vika giggled. What are you talking about, Kirill Alexeyevich? You know perfectly well that even if I leave Dima, you will never agree to marry me. Yes, that's true, but you'd make a wonderful concubine. A concubine? Yes, all the great rulers in the East had them. They were women they loved, but never married. Vika laughed. Do you compare yourself with the great rulers of the East, Kirill Alexeyevich? No, I'm comparing you to the great concubines of the East. There was silence. I could tell that Kirill Alexeyevich was kissing my wife again. After a moment, Vika, panting, said, "Can you imagine how wonderful it would be if I lived with you as your concubine, and Dima, my husband, lived with us as our slave? I can't imagine that he would ever agree to this." Yes, I know, but it's still a wonderful fantasy. Yes, it is. There was silence again. Finally, Vika said, "It's getting late. I'd rather go inside the apartment, and you'd better go home. I'll see you at the office in the morning." Yes, you can. Good night, Vika. Good night, Kirill Alexeyevich. Vika entered the apartment and closed the front door behind her. For a moment she froze and listened while Kirill Alexeyevich returned to his limousine. I heard the car door close. The engine started, the headlights came on, and then the Rolls-Royce broke away from the curb and sped down the street. My wife came into the room. It was dark inside the room. When she crossed the room, she didn't see me sitting on the couch. As she passed me, I noticed that in addition to her purse and sweater, she had several other items of clothing. As soon as she entered the kitchen, Vika turned on the light. She had her back to me, so she still didn't know that I was less than a meter away from her. She put her purse and the clothes she was carrying on the dining table. Her bra, nylon stockings, were stacked next to her sweater. When my wife turned around, I was surprised. She was usually very picky about her appearance, but now her hair was disheveled. Mascara was smeared on her face, and most shockingly, the top of her dress was pulled down. They must have been completely exposed the whole time she was talking to Kirill Alexeyevich on the doorstep of our apartment. Vika looked into the room and saw me sitting on the couch. She gasped. After a moment, she said nervously, "Dima, I didn't realize that you were still awake. How long have you been sitting like this?" I fell asleep on the couch after the football match ended. I woke up when I heard Kirill Alexeyevich's limousine pull up in front of the house. My wife asked nervously, "Did you hear our conversation on the porch?" I nodded. "Yes. That's it? I think so." Vika stared at the floor. Obviously, she was trying to think of something to say. I said, "I'm your husband. I think it's okay for me to see them." Realizing the importance of what she had just done, Vika began to cry. After a moment, she looked at me with tearful eyes and said, "Dima, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I always hoped you'd never find out." I patted the patch on the couch next to me. "Why don't you come over here and sit down? Do you mind if I collect my thoughts first? I feel a little uncomfortable right now because of that." I nodded. "Come on." Vika came over to the sofa and nervously sat down next to me. As soon as she sat down, she said, "You probably know, don't you?" "I think so. Did the two of you do it tonight?" Considering my wife's appearance, I guess it was a stupid question, but I still had to ask. Vika nodded. "Yes." "Where?" "In his limo. We were parked on the shore of the Gulf of Finland." "Couldn't his driver have seen you?" Again, I guess it was a stupid question, but strange things happen to a person in this situation. "No, Kirill Alexeyevich has a curtain for privacy." "Did you let him use you?" "Yes." "How many times?" "Only twice." Just twice? What does it mean? Does he do it more often sometimes? As soon as she realized the meaning of how she formulated her answer, Vika bit her lower lip and covered her face with her hands. After a moment, she said softly, Dima, please don't do this. I shook my head. I need to know. She looked up. Good. Sometimes Kirill Alexeyevich can do this 3 or 4 times in an evening. I was silent. I needed time to absorb this information. Finally, I asked, how long have you been having an affair with him? It started about a month before I became his administrative assistant. That was over a year ago. Dima, I'm so sorry. We just sat together for a minute, both of us staring at the floor. Finally, Vika said, please, Dima, you have to understand. With Kirill Alexeyevich, it's just making love. I don't like him. I only love you. He's a wonderful lover, and I like his dominant personality, but you're the only man I want to be with for the rest of my life. That's not what you told him tonight in front of our front door to the apartment. What do you mean? You offered to leave me to marry him. Shaking her head desperately, Vika said, No, no, that's not what I meant when I said that at all. I was just trying to point out to Kirill Alexeyevich that even if I left you, he would never agree to marry me. You told him you were ready to become his concubine. My wife sighed. Please, Dima, you have to understand. It's just a fantasy, and you're the central part of that fantasy. Before I ever think about agreeing to become Kirill Alexeyevich's concubine, you will have to agree to come with me as my slave. Shaking her head, Vika quickly added, when I actually say it, it sounds so self-serving. Dima, you have to believe me. It's just a fantasy. I would never dream of leaving you. Baby, I'll do anything to make it up to you. I don't love Kirill Alexeyevich, at least not the way I love you. He's fun and exciting, and I enjoy his power and wealth, but if it means losing you, I'll throw it all away in the blink of an eye. Honey, I'm going to quit my job and go work with you at your little construction company. I'd rather be poor than rich and powerful without you. I promise that I will never see Kirill Alexeyevich again. Please, just don't leave me. Vika was upset. She was desperately trying to convince me that she really loved me. She spoke at high speed for more than a minute. Her concern made it clear to me that she was telling the truth. She really loved me. That was all I needed to know. The moment she stopped to catch her breath, I whispered, it's my fantasy too. She spoke again. Dima, you have to give me another chance. I was captured by the glamour of my... Suddenly, she stopped in mid-sentence and looked at me. Dima, what did you just say? I repeated it softly. It's my fantasy too. What is it? What are your fantasies? To live as your slave while you are Kirill Alexeyevich's concubine. My wife stared at me. She was completely amazed. Dima, do you understand what you're saying? I think so. I smiled at Vika. What I don't understand is why you're so surprised. Everything we've done since we got married has led us to this moment. Think about how much time the two of us have spent researching books and websites about women's authority and women's marriages. Think about how happy we both are when we read stories about cuckold husbands together. Vika, your noble dominance and my humble servility now define our marriage. I do all the housework, and you manage our finances. Tonight I bathed you and laid out the clothes you were going to wear on a dinner date with another man. Vika, I'm already your slave. Vika shook her head. Dima, I'm so sorry. I had no idea I was being so selfish. No, you weren't being selfish. That's what we both want. It's your nature to dominate, and mine to be submissive. Vika, I was born to be your slave, and you were born to be my mistress. I firmly believe that it is my destiny to serve you. Dima, are you sure? I replied decisively, yes, it is. I've never been so sure of anything in my life. Then I paused and added, you must promise to love me and treat me with respect and kindness. Vika smiled at me. Dima, it's going to be so easy. I promise you that I will always be a kind, attentive, and loving mistress. She thought for a moment and then excitedly said, it can be wonderful. Kirill Alexeyevich has a large house on the shore of the Gulf of Finland and a luxurious 2-story apartment in a house on the banks of the Neva River. I am sure he will provide us with a separate bedroom in both residences. Don't you want to sleep with him? Vika looked at me. Is everything all right? You will be his concubine. Vika shook her head. It would be nice to be able to sleep with him from time to time, but I want to sleep with you most of the time. I think this will probably be normal for Kirill Alexeyevich. He prefers to sleep alone. That's one of the reasons he doesn't want to get married. I suspect that most of the time I will start the night in his bedroom, but after I finish making love, I will join you in our bedroom. Is that okay with you? That would be great. Living with Kirill Alexeyevich will make your life much easier. He has a full house staff both in his mansion and in his apartment. You won't have to do any housework. If you wanted to, you could keep your job. I know you've always wanted to do this. You'll have to find something to do with your free time. You already know how many hours Kirill Alexeyevich and I spend on work. And I'm sure he'll want to spend quite a lot of time alone with me. I smiled at Vika. I enjoyed her obvious excitement about it all. She smiled back at me. Damachka, I can't wait to tell this to Kirill Alexeyevich. He's going to be so excited. My wife took a moment to savor the thought and then turned to me. Suddenly, her behavior changed. In a voice filled with rights, she said, "Slave, I think it's time for you to get on your knees." I obediently slid off the couch and knelt at Vicky's feet. "I would like you to demonstrate your willingness to serve me by kissing my feet." I dutifully took off my wife's high heels and gently hugged her legs in my arms. I renounced all rights of Vicky's husband and officially accepted my new position as her slave. That's enough, slave. It was one of my most intimate fantasies. Suddenly a question came to my mind. I looked at Vika. Is this the first time I've done this? She smiled at me. Yes, Dima, it is so. In the past, I always washed my face before letting you make love to me. I nodded and leaned forward. Vika was excited, very excited. As soon as she came to her senses, Vika bent down and pulled me onto the sofa next to her. I said, "Vika, let me ask you a question." She nodded. "Of course, what would you like to know? Who do you love more, me or him?" Vika looked at me for a while. Suddenly, she understood the meaning of my question. She smiled at me and replied, "Of course you are, Dima.